So about a year and a half ago, you guys might remember that I made a video where I calibrated the laser on my GameCube. As I've since learned, and as a lot of y'all in the comments have kind of pointed out to me, that is more of a band-aid solution to a larger problem. For anyone who doesn't know, the GameCube was actually released in a period of time where capacitors were not being made very great, and a lot of them that were produced in that era have started failing over the past several years. And now my GameCube is a victim of that as well. So I went on eBay and I purchased a set of capacitors to replace on the drive board so that hopefully I can fix this problem and not make things a whole lot worse. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to tear this guy down to the drive board. We're going to replace those capacitors, and we're going to hopefully get this guy back in good running order. So yeah, let's adjust the view so you guys can see what I'm doing, and we'll get at this project and see how difficult it actually is. All right. Here we go. Now, in order to do this, you are going to have to know how to solder. I'm not the best solderer in the world, as you could tell by the other videos I've done where I've soldered stuff, but we're gonna give it a try anyway, because from what it seemed like online, it doesn't seem like this is too difficult of a job. I'm gonna be using this solder on recommendation from my electrical engineer friend. He says that he doesn't really use flux when he solders because he uses this rosin core stuff. Hopefully this stuff will help me to be okay without flux, because I don't have any and I wanna get this done. But before we can get to soldering, let's get this guy taken apart. You are going to need a few tools to get this guy free. I personally like this iFixit kit, as I've sang its praises many times over the years. If you guys want one of these, I'll put a link down in the description below for it. But the first thing we got to do is we actually have to get the Game Boy player off. This is not something you'll have to do if you don't have a Game Boy player, but I do, so I got to get this bad boy free. Luckily, it's just 2 screws holding this guy in, and then it just pops right free after it unplugs from the bottom of the cube. Set this guy off to the side. Now the next thing you're gonna need to get the GameCube open is you're going to need a game bit driver for the 4 screws that are in these 4 holes here. I believe we need the bigger of the 2 game bit drivers. I think I had to do a little extendo magic with this one before. I put a bit inside of a bit and prayed that that was gonna be enough. So we're gonna see. Yeah, because that's not long enough to get down on it, but the 2 of them together is. Now, we are going to have to take a lot of screws out, so I do recommend you put these in some kind of tray. I like to use the lid of the iFixit kit because it just makes things a bit easier. And with those 4 screws out, this guy should just lift right off. Here is the lid of our cube, and we can set this guy to the side because we won't need it until we're putting this guy back together. All right, so what we got to do is we got to actually get this driver board here out, because the capacitors we're going to be replacing are underneath this guy here. So in order to do that, we first need to get the front plate here off, and that just has 2 pins right here, and then it lifts free. Now, since we only need this, we're not actually going to take this guy completely off because it is just held in with the ribbon cable here. Please, for the love of all that is holy, be careful with ribbon cables if you do want to take this guy off. They're very fragile, so just please be careful. What we're actually going to be taking out now are these 4 screws right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are part of the memory card assembly, but it also helps hold that whole setup on. So that needs to get out of the way. And then when those screws are all loose, these both here should be able to just lift right out. And there we go. We're gonna set these to the side, but that's that out of the way. You know what? I think I am gonna take this front plate off just because it's very much in the way and I don't want to risk damaging the ribbon cable. So in order to get this ribbon cable out, you need to just slip your finger underneath it right here and lift straight up. And it pops right free like that. Now we can set this aside so it doesn't get damaged. Next up, we're gonna have to take the fan loose, and we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna take it off. That way we don't accidentally damage it. So you gotta take 2 screws free. You gotta take this guy here and this guy here, and then you'll have to unplug it as well. Going to get the screws out. We gotta take the back plate off first, which I forgot about. So this, just like the front, is only just clipped on and it just lifts right out. And so we'll just set it to the side over with the front plate. And now this whole thing comes free. We just need to, again, unplug it here, remove the wire, and we can set this guy out of the way as well. This is our fan assembly, but also our power button. All right, next up, we just now need to take a bunch of screws loose. We've got, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12 screws we gotta take loose, so let's get those out. And with that, this whole assembly should come right free. And here we go. This is either a heat sink or an RF shield or a bit of both, and either way it needs to come off to be able to do the next bit. And that is done with 4 screws, here, 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 and here. Luckily, we're able to use the same screwdriver bit for pretty much everything on this job. I'm sorry, there were 6 screws. There's 2 more over here that were kind of hiding from me. And then with those screws out, that should just lift right up. And then we've got our board here. So while this is certainly not the direct intention of this guy, it's going to be useful for doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this vise up to hold this guy, so that way I don't accidentally hurt it or myself. Okay, there's not going to be a really good way to do this, so I'm just gonna figure it out and say a bit of a prayer. That'll hold it for now, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this board here out. I just didn't want to rest the weight of this thing on the disk drive, which is now underneath, or like on the spindle and potentially scratch up the laser. If you guys remember, the potentiometer that we adjusted before is actually right here. This little guy right here. And we are gonna have to adjust that again, but we'll do that when we get there, because we're not there yet. So now we've got to get these 4 screws out. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've got to take this cable loose. We got to take this ribbon cable loose, and we've got to remove this. We got to take this ribbon cable loose, and we've got to remove these 2 wires so we can actually pull the board out and flip it over and fix our capacitors. It's at this point that if you have some, you probably want to get some tweezers, just because we're going to be working with some really finicky stuff, and we want to make sure we don't accidentally like damage something. So we're going to go ahead and take these ribbon cables free. This guy here, you should be able to just slide something up underneath it. And wiggle it back and forth. Pop it free. That's one. So this lower one here is not going to just pull free. It's got this little black frame surrounding it, which you got to like just slide out with your fingertips. You see how it's working its way out right there? Clicked, clicked, and now this will just pull right free, right like so. The blue cable here will just work its way out. And then we have the wire. You will want to remember which color goes to where. Luckily, it is labeled. So you can see this one says brown, this one says red. Now, remember with soldering, one of the most important things is you don't want to let the board get too hot, because that will damage it. So let's just, there we go. It's 1 free. And 2 free. Now with those all loose and free, we can take our board free. And it should just be 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, and then that guy should lift right out. So let's do it. There's 1 clip right here holding this guy in place. I'm going to just get something over there to push it out of the way. And there is our drive board, and there are our capacitors. So we are going to need to be careful when we go to both remove and replace these capacitors, because there's a lot of tiny resistors nearby to these capacitors, which we don't want to mess up. As somebody who has messed them up before, it's not fun at all. I highly recommend you taking a picture of how these are laid out, because that's going to be very critical to putting this thing back together correctly, because they have to be put back together in the correct direction. All right, well, we are just going to systematically take these out and work our way through them. So let's see what we're doing, see what we're working with here. I think we're going to start with this guy here. So I only have a single pair of tweezers and a soldering iron, so we're going to just take our time, and this is where things just get a little squiffy. Again, just be very careful with these resistors. The last thing we want is to screw something up. We want to start with a more isolated one because I just don't want to accidentally screw something up. I'm committed now, so go. That's the start of that one free. All right, that's one free. Luckily, the eBay listing that I had bought from had a guide as to which capacitor goes where. So we will be following that to put these back into place. And since it has that, I'm gonna go ahead and take all of these off before I start putting any back together, just to make it a little cleaner looking, a little simpler for me in the long run, so that way I can focus on removing and then focus on putting them back. All right, let's do it. Okay, so that's all the capacitors free. We did it. We got them loose. This right here, I might have did a bad right there. We will just have to wait and see. I can tell you this for sure though, this is a bit more difficult than other jobs I've done. Okay, now we're ready to put the capacitors back on. I am going to lower the temperature on my soldering iron, mainly because I don't want to risk doing any more damage to the board than I might have already done. But regardless, we are going to get started again. And just to get it out of the way, we're going to start with that one that I might have hurt the most, So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more solder to each of these points. And then I'm going to take our new capacitor. I would like this to be known that, again, I am not a master solderer. So I can only hope that I'm doing this correctly. That one is where that one goes. Because it has all three there. It's stressing me out. So let's get it out of the way. The set right here. Okay, there we go. We got them all back on. I think my joints are good. I'm just gonna pray and we can start putting this guy back together now, thankfully. But now if you guys remember what I had talked about before, where we had adjusted this pot here, we want to check and make sure that it's not going to be as strong as it was. Because we've put new capacitors into it, it's going to function more like it was when it was new. So we want to make sure those numbers are set to where it was when it was new. So the original reading on the potentiometer for a 001 GameCube is 450 to 600. I'm going to bring it up to the 450 mark and we will see what happens. There you go. See, I'm reading about 181. So we don't want it to be that low with the laser going back to basically full power. Give it about a quarter turn. There we go, 450. 449, 450. That's where we want to be. I opted to go ahead and put the whole thing back together because if it doesn't work, I'm gonna have to just start completely over and then we won't have a video this week, so. All right then, let's get her plugged in and see if she works. All right, so the first round, it did not work. So I tore it back down. I reflowed the solder on all the capacitors just to make sure they were all good. And I went ahead and readjusted the potentiometer from 450 to 350. Because whenever I put it back together after reflowing the solder, it tried to work but didn't. So I pulled the potentiometer down to 350 ohms instead of 450 ohms. And let's see what happens. So we power it up. It goes into its menu because it thinks the door is open. It'll flip these two little things back to make it seem like it's on, make it think the door's closed. All right, that's a good sign. Hey, awesome. Thank God. I was really worried there for a second. Okay, good. Good. All right, now we can actually put this thing back together. And if it does, I'm going to double check and make sure this works again. And if it does, we're done. That sucked. I'm not going to say that was impossible because I was able to accomplish it. And I am what some would call an idiot. But that is definitely the hardest soldering job that I've had to do so far because there's just a lot of little pieces that you've got to be able to keep track of and you've got to make sure they're all set properly. I feel accomplished, but that still was very difficult. So I promise you can do it, but make sure you really want to. I'm a purist, so I want the hardware. And so to me, doing this was worth it, but that was difficult. Having done it now though, I think I could do it again with not too much trouble, but just solder at your own risk, you know? But I think that's going to be it for me for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you like what I do here, hit subscribe because that helps me out a lot. But again, I want to thank you guys so much for being here and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, y'all.